Stacy Sells, and I'm a 1982 graduate of this college, and I'm really glad to be back here. It's not working now. Oh, there it is. I'm glad to be back here today. Okay, bring me that thing. Okay, we'll just do this. Okay. I'm glad to be back. I have a couple of old friends that are here, and then a lot of people who I've never met before. But if you're a part of this community that's so lovely, I have wonderful memories of this place. And I have to remind you that when I graduated in 1982, microwave ovens had just been invented. We still didn't have a device to record television programs. Nobody had seat warmers in their cars. And we had not even invented the words internet, laptop, social media, smartphone. It was all a landline, folks. So I'm not from the Stone Age. I'm probably your parents' age. But I just want to put that in perspective for you, because I have to say that I don't think for a young person about the age that you all are, it gets much better than this place. And we didn't have all that stuff. And so we weren't distracted. And now I am. I'm terribly distracted by social media, the internet, and my smartphone. Terribly. Ask my children. They'll probably tell you I do it more than they do. But I will say that what we did have here was one another. We had a lot of discussions that took place. We had a lot of meetings, but that's where you connected. It was with meetings. It wasn't on the internet. We began to know one another. We began to build relationships. We began to love one another, and we began to have great dialogue about problems. Whether it was a problem in our dorm, a problem on the campus, or in Conway, in Arkansas, or what we saw as the world. Then you couple that with guys like Garrett McCainch, who taught us about the European revolutions, the Revolutionary Wars. You had Francis Christie, who challenged us to his 3 parts of biblical literature and thought. We called it BLT. And he challenged us to have a better sense of understanding about God's purpose for us on this earth. And then we had Dr. J, and I'm not talking about Barth, I'm talking about J. McDaniel, and he challenged us to read more about the Tao and Buddhism, and how did you merge the Western and the Eastern religions into a life of intentional purpose. And he still does that today, I think. So this place is really great for me, and I love to be back. And I was recalling this whole discussion about power today, and I was thinking about 1981 and 1982 and what was going on with us in terms of power. And power is an interesting thing. You can... There's volumes and volumes, there's buildings and buildings filled with books just about the word power. But I will tell you, it's here that I learned and was challenged by people like J. McDaniel about the power of people and the power of change. It may have been more Martin Luther King type or Gandhi-like or J. McDaniel-like, but it was a beautiful kind of power that I believe we were challenged to. In 1981, Ronald Reagan had been elected the 40th president of the United States of America. And in January of '82, he was sworn into office, and he was, by March, he had outlined his agenda for education in the United States of America. And it was 3 things. One was abolition of Pell Grants, the federal Pell Grant program. 2 was voluntary prayer in public schools. And 3 was, once those were accomplished, we'll just do away with the Department of Education, okay? So Wow. A lot of us really didn't like any of those three things, but certainly we had a lot of students on this campus that would not have been on this campus if not for the federal Pell Grant program. So Pamela and I were talking. Pamela and I went to school in Barry, and we were all in the same class, and I was president of the Student Government Association at that time. There were a lot of students that were on Pell Grants. I wasn't, but there were a lot of students here, and I thought that's what the Student Government Association was supposed to do, was to take care of all the students and what was going on with them. So the Student Senate got together, and we started putting together some things, and then the next thing we knew, the campus kind of kicked into gear. The next thing I knew, Hendrix was really kind of the ringleader in Arkansas for that. And we had a congressman for the 2nd District, and his name was Congressman Ed Bethune. He was a very nice guy. He was a Republican, though, and he had aligned himself with President Reagan. So we had one goal, and that one goal was to get Ed Bethune to vote with us, to vote with students, to not vote with Ronald Reagan, to do away with the federal Pell Grant program. We were just kids. And remember this, we didn't have email and we didn't have fax machines, okay? So we decided we were going to run a grassroots campaign, and we started at Hendrix, and the kids from Hendrix started calling Ed Bethune's office, writing Ed Bethune's office, because we needed to get this vote. And then we went across town, and we found some kids over at UCA, and they went, "What? Are you kidding?" So they got involved, and then we started calling our friends up at Fayetteville, and then friends at Fayetteville started calling friends at ASU, and before you know it, we had students all over the state who were putting up posters in their dormitories. They were doing call banks. They were doing letter writing campaigns. And we were just a bunch of students, and the culture had told us it won't work. You can't make that happen. He's going to vote with the president. He's a new Republican congressman. This is a new Republican president. It won't happen. And we didn't listen to him. And we kept working, and we kept working. And guess what? It happened. Congressman Bethune voted with us students, and today we still have a federal Pell Grant program. So, you know, that was one of the first things I saw in the power of people. It was powerful to me to see what students could do. And I guess the biggest thing we ended up with outside these campus rallies and stuff is one day we marched from MacArthur Park in downtown Little Rock all the way to the state capitol. And man, you know, we thought we were hippies and we were tough and we were cool. And it was great. I loved it. Anyway, from there, you know, Hendrix, I think the faculty almost kind of challenged you to challenge them. And we did some challenging of, why don't we have more students of color here? And so we started meeting with the admission office. And we started saying, why does Hendrix have its endowment fund invested in the Coca-Cola company? Because they're for South African white apartheid. And so we had a tent city. You remember the tent city that we had out here? And so it was fun. And now I look back and I really think they encouraged us to learn how to have power in people, in organized people, united with a purpose, an intentional purpose, but that we were civil and that we were respectful. And they wanted to teach us how to do it the right way. Okay? Now, I want to move forward just a year. Ronald Reagan was going to abolish the federal Pell Grant program. He lost that. He was going to abolish the Department of Education. He lost that too. In fact, the secretary of the Department of Education was a guy from Utah named Terrell Bell. And Terrell Bell said, I want to impanel some bright people in America, and I want them to analyze the public education system in this country and get back to us with a report. And some of you old people will remember, because a lot of you weren't even born then, there was a report that was issued called A Nation at Risk. And the report opened up and it said, if we don't seek change, we have created a nation at risk. And they talked about so many things that we talk about today, shallow curriculum. They talked about American students didn't go to school as long as the European and the Asian countries. And A Nation at Risk talked about teacher training and how it was just not connected to today's world. It talked about lots and lots of things. And, you know, I had watched us create this revolution at Hendrix that went to UCA, that went to Fayetteville, that went to ASU and all over the state. And here this Nation of Risk came out, and it sounded like important stuff. And everybody just kind of put it on the shelf, put it in the paper shredder, and nobody talked about it. There was no American Revolution. None. 10 years later, I'm a mother of two, and I send my first child off to the pre-K program in the Little Rock School District. And my mother had told me that if you want to do one thing that's important for your child, when they enter school, be involved. She said, my mother said, that's how you let your children know that school is important, that you stay very involved. So I did. And I was the PTA president, I was the vice president, I was the room mother, and I made cookies even when I really didn't know how to make cookies very well. And I made bags of Halloween treats, and I did all these things, and I thought that's what she meant. And it probably was. But it was so shallow to me, and I started asking questions. Why are some of these children in the room not speaking? Why are some of these kids, they don't ever ask questions? What happened to their eyes? They don't have any sparkle in their eyes. Because I'd really never been around poverty. And I started learning about poverty, and I started learning about not just children in poverty, but I started learning about parents of children in poverty and where they came from. And so I started asking questions, but the culture said to me, don't ask those questions. This is just the way it is, and it's tragic, and it's unfortunate. These parents aren't very good parents. They're poor parents, and they don't come up here. Have you heard that? Have you ever heard? There's no parent engagement at this school. Well, of course there's not any parent engagement. These people have a terrible memory of their own time in school, and they go to the school, and the teachers and the school secretary talk terrible to them. Why do they want to come up there and get engaged at that school? And they say, Mrs. Jones, you didn't bring your child's lunch up here yesterday. And it's a horrible system. It's a culture in these schools that is, just go spend 30 minutes in a school office one day, and you'll know what I'm talking about. And you're shaking your head, and you're shaking your head. Thank you. And so the culture said, we can't do anything with these kids. They just come this way, and we just can't do anything with them. Sounded like the culture of nothingness from a nation at risk. And so then I started looking at Arkansas, and I got involved with a thing called the Lakeview School District ruling. And again, I started hearing about a culture outside of Little Rock of school districts of 85 kids. They said, leave us alone. Let us control what it is that we do in our little town of Wiener or Wilburn or whatever. And I'm not saying anything bad about those communities, but 65% of Arkansas schools didn't teach the mandatory curriculum. And the culture there told these kids, you don't need physics. There's nothing you're going to learn in physics that you're going to need out there in that world. You don't need calculus. And you don't let anybody tell you need to speak Spanish. We teach English in Arkansas. That's what we speak. We speak English. You don't need to learn any foreign language. And that's the culture that was pervasive out there. I went out to a rally one night in Russellville, and this man got up and he said, I don't want better schools because of, this was right up the road here. It's kind of scary. He said, I don't want better schools because if schools are better, my daughter might want to go to college. And if she goes to college, she might meet and fall in love with a boy from Texas. That's what he said. From Texas, you know, like that was hell or something. And he said, and then my grandchildren will be in Texas. That was what he was thinking. Another man said, look, I run this garage over here and I fix cars. And I don't have anything more than a 9th grade education. And little Johnny doesn't need any more than that either. He doesn't need to be uppity and think he can do more. I mean, I couldn't believe it. This is the culture, okay? And so then I started studying the South. And if you look at the South, if you look at these maps, I was looking at some the other day, and I actually had some slides, but my slides aren't working. Well, I do Macintosh, and it wasn't gelling. And so, but you can look from North Carolina to South Carolina, down into Florida, then across Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Oklahoma, then dip over into New Mexico, down into Texas, and back over to Florida. All, if you look at these maps of poverty, achievement in mathematics, achievement in English, freshmen, ninth grade students who end up graduating, who goes to college, who graduates, per capita income, blue-collar workers, unemployment, and more poverty. It's a cycle. It is a cycle. And it's an unfortunate cycle, but it's one that I think that only will change unless people take the power to change the culture. Now, here's what I've learned. Policy is tough. And it's like they say, it's like watching sausage being made and you really don't want to watch it. And I've been involved with policy for a long time, and it's hard. And you can come home at night and you can say, man, I need a therapist. This is crazy. I've been involved with policy, and I've decided that culture is easier to change. And so I want to tell you 2 stories, and then I'm going to sit down. Is anyone timing this? I have 1 minute left, 1 minute and 40 seconds left. I met a young boy named Raheem, and Raheem was in the 3rd grade. He read at the 1st grade level, but he was getting ready to be promoted to the 4th grade. Does that make sense? And so that's the culture. That's pervasive. We can't do anything about Raheem because he's African American and his father's in jail and his mother is dead and his grandmother's raising him and she doesn't care. I then went to go work on a KIPP school board. How many of you know about KIPP? If you don't know about KIPP, write it down, KIPP.org. It's a charter school program, and the only one in Arkansas is in Phillips County and up in Blytheville. 2 of the poorest counties in the United States of America. And let me tell you what I learned from Raheem and from KIPP. There are 2 things that we can do to create a revolution, and it's going to require people. And if you don't have anything that's going on with intentional purpose in your life, I want to ask you to think about this. Go teach a poor child to read before they're in the 3rd grade. Or go be a mentor in a high school or a middle school with a child who all they need is someone to say, you can do this, and I'm going to help you get there. That's power in people, and there's so many kids out there today who are waiting for you. Thank you.